Hello and good evening, one and all. Round 5 of the oNiD Community oNiD Community Racing Sim Hound British oNiD4 series goes to Oulton Park. Not the full circuit, we're going to do the island this time round. It's a bit of circuit cut off, but a very much tighter hairpin in the first sector. Apart from that, it is a good old British circuit. The theme for this season as well, with the oNiD4 British Championship, and lots of fantastic park circuits. We've seen some fantastic action up and down the grid throughout the past few weeks, and we are now beyond the halfway point and mark the start of the second part of season 3 here on oNiD Community Racing. And it comes with me once again three times this week, Scotty. Hi.
It's yeah, I hope you're all not sick of my voice. Been here 3 days in a row, but here we are back with some more chaotic oNiD4 action. And with Circuit 4, Oulton Park, lovely wee circuit running the island circuit. A little bit shorter, get a few more laps in, and yeah, have that tight hairpin that who knows how that will go when it comes to our reverse grid race a little later this evening. We're already into qualifying for tonight. Again, 15 minutes, all the drivers out on track, trying to set their grid positions for the first race. 35-minute feature race to start us off after qualifying. And here we have Ben Brown, I think our first driver to complete a flying lap. 120.0 is first time on the board. As I think first thing we should really get into mentioning is new iRacing updates come out, and with that, these open-wheeled single-seaters, they've got themselves a new tyre model.
It do indeed. So just keep an eye out for some people maybe still testing the limits of this new tyre model. I haven't had the opportunity to drive it yet, but I haven't heard anything negative so far about it, which is always lovely to hear. iRacing.com doing what I believe is another wonderful job with updating the latest in-game tyre models and some performance as well. So we'll see how these guys handle it. I think it'll be interesting to see if there will be any certain issues or mistakes that are made from people, and maybe try and get its driver in to discuss. Maybe we'll see what we can do. As we see a couple of new lap times coming up onto the board. Jack Dan getting up onto P1 as it stands, 119.5, or is following Matt High, was briefly on pole in a very retro style Formula 1 livery. That's old Jaguar livery, the green and white HSBC. Yes, it is.
Currently sitting in second, just under 2/10 off of Jack Dan's provisional pole time. It's going to be able to pit lane as they find some traffic. I think they were a little too wide maybe at that final corner, invalidating their lap time. Nigel Stott comes through to complete another lap. Doesn't improve, but Philip Staples puts themselves up to P6. Ash Hill slots in behind in P7. Track limits here at Oulton Park can be a little bit tricky, especially that final corner as well as the first corner, or maybe even turn 3. Cascades there. Just seen in background, Nigel maybe potentially running a little bit wide. I found one of the tracks I've driven in iRacing, I found the track limits to be somewhat harsh here. I feel like, if I remember correctly, a couple of occasions it pinged me, even though I did have a wheel or two within the white line. So you gotta be careful not to use too much of the runoff, as we see in the background. One of the oNiD cars going for a spin, and JRPH having a spin in sympathy.
Ooh. How interesting. So maybe Tybor playing a little bit of a issue here, maybe, potentially. A couple of cars having a separate incidents there, and they get going again, keeping out the wall, as the nature of these British circuits, especially the park circuits. Tight and twisty, the walls aren't too far away, so if you do have an incident, you're not going to have long before you potentially have an encounter with a barrier. That's something to bear in mind. And of course, the damage model on iRacing as well being rather realistic. A tap on the wall could screw your suspension and cause a meatball flag to be waved and head into which would force you to come into the pit lane for repairs. 6 minutes down. 6 minutes. Yeah, 6 minutes down. However, we've got another 7 to go. 8 to go, shall I say? I can math. Just 9. There we go. It's been a day. Almost halfway through our qualifying session, and we are still awaiting 4 cars to set a lap time. Sean McCardle being one of those who's now got up onto the timing board, and I'm just going to quickly edit that timing board to see the gap to the leader. There is a mighty big gap to Jack Dan, who's just done a new lap time actually, 119.2. 0.440 seconds is the nearest competitor, Luca Monroe, who is actually about to come to finish a lap. Let's see what he does. He's got a car ahead of him, car 22 ahead of him. That's one of the oNiD drivers. Comes to the line, doesn't improve his time. However, Mike Peppers gets up to second position, 0.3 of a second behind Jack Dan. Not close enough yet to challenge for the pole position. That Jack Dan is looking racy in that blue and white liveried car. There was a car off the side of the circuit as well. I believe that was again another one of the other cars. Ben Brown maybe potentially having a bit of an excursion. There's about 2 or 3 cars off at that point. That was rather interesting.
Yeah, it just looked at the timing board, and quite a few names popping up with red markers to indicate that they'd gone off track. This was Ben Brown's moment, just understeering a little bit, trying to push through Cascades. Runs out onto the grass and is going to return to the pits to put a new fresh set of tyres on. Jack Dan across the line once more, improves even further into the 19.1s. I wonder if we will see sub 19s this session, or if that'll be a little out of reach. It looks like it'll be out of reach for all of our drivers, but maybe Jack Dan can just break that barrier. Very close though,
Oh.
behind Jack, Dan, Sean McGardle, just sitting outside of the top 10 at the moment. A second off of our current pole time. We've got Peter Stather holding that final top 10 position, coming cross line. Can they improve? No, doesn't seem to be a valid lap, though it was for
Oh,
Luca
that won't be.
Monroe. Oh, yeah, that is a little bit wide. Invalidates none of that. Luca Monroe has put themselves into P2, breaking within 3/10 of our current pole sitter. And Fortoy puts themselves into the top 15, 1.5 seconds off the top time. As we see Monroe into the hairpin. Matt High putting themselves up to 4th place. So drivers continuing to find time as they get a little more comfortable with their cars, with the balance we've seen so far throughout the season. Drivers struggling with the rear end, and imagine they've been hoping that the new tire model helps give them a little bit more comfort, allows them to push the car a little bit more. Without that happening, I think we can clearly see that yes, these cars still have a bit of rear instability, judging by the synchronized spinning coming through Knickerbrick corner.
At least someone knows the corner's names because I can't remember them. So thank you for that. Appreciated. As indeed we saw Luca just having a little bit of a moment, but does rejoin the circuit, is able to continue, keeps it out, crucially keeps out the barrier. As we see in a couple of cars setting some time, that is Tomlinson getting up into 17th, improving a bit of a time now as he starts another flying lap. Shall we jump on board with him? Oh, that's a very random camera angle. We're not gonna do that one. No, yeah, that's better.
Very wide vision there, apparently, for Dan Tomlinson. We get to watch through the hairpin again. Another car spun on the exit as we have a couple more times improving. Mahai now up to P3, but coming towards the normally second chicane, but the only chicane we have here on the shortened island circuit. Now through the right-hander of Knickerbrick. Important corner here is you're going to carry this momentum all the way up through Clay Hill here towards the infamous Jerd sort of double apex right-hander that will reach here. Sort of a bit of a tight line from Dan Tomlinson here, not troubling the exit curb too much either. It's come down to Lodge corner, effectively the final corner. How much of the exit curb? Oh, a lot more of the exit curb. Keeps it off of the grass though, so across the line for Dan Tomlinson now. Will it be an improvement? We wait for a time where it is an improvement, but they still sit in 17th place.
Indeed they do. So, and we just wait a little while longer, just seeing who else is on our lap. I think we just had Terry J. Williams jump up a couple of positions back into 20th. It was a 121.2 personal best for him. 2 seconds off the pace, however. He's got a little while to go, but Jack Dan sitting in the pit lane as it stands, sitting quite happy there, 119.1 with 3.5 minutes to go. Oh, it's car 36. Oh, what you doing? Why, that was an interesting rejoin, and that's going to cause a little bit of noise. That was Jory Screwer trying to rejoin the circuit, going off at the hairpin, and eventually finding a way how to not to rejoin.
Odd place to find yourself off the circuit. See time in from Ben Brown as he pulls off once again. Does your right, but Ben Brown pumping themselves up to P4. Very close from that. Well, we've got from P2 all the way to P14 within 1 second. Drivers coming out of the pits to start one final stint as we have 2 minutes 40 seconds left to the end of the session. Remember, when we get to the 15-minute mark, the session will immediately end. Drivers will not be able to finish a final flying lap, so you'll need to get yourself starting a final lap fairly soon as time is ticking down.
Indeed is, and not much time for people to improve. Let's look at the sector time. We'll try and get this to work again between Monroe, High and Brown. So we'll see that Matt High currently going 0.050 seconds quicker than his personal best. It's not enough. He loses time in Sector 2. It was only by 1,000th of a second, mind you, so it's not that big of a loss, but it looks to be improving on his pass up. I'm not sure if it's going to be enough for pole. It's definitely not going to be enough for pole, but it might challenge for P2. He's finding marginal gains through this lap. You may just see a very slight improvement if he keeps it tidy going into the final sector.
Yeah, Jack Dan into the pits. They're not going to be improving on their 119.175. So how close can everyone else get? Matt High here looks like they are on for a potential P2 time. Just one corner to go. Braking for Lodge corner. Swings the car in, picks up the apex, uses the exit curb. Looked neat and tidy. So we think this should be an improvement for Matt High. They come across the line. And it is not, in fact, an improvement. Only a 119.6. And that will have been their final flying lap. As we're into the final minute of qualifying, they'll not have enough time to complete these laps before the session does end.
What looked like an invalidation than anything. It did have some good sector times there, but I just wonder if he invalidated his lap at some point, which we didn't see, which was...
Well, the lap time did come up, so we'd hint that it isn't. Nigel Stock bumps themselves up a couple of places within the top 10, beating Ben Holmes by 0.05 of a second, just showing how tight it is. Only 15 thousandths behind Peter Stather in front. Richard Ashford improves their time. Don't think they jumped up any places, though. We see more and more drivers completing their final laps as the clock ticks down. 5 seconds remaining for any last people to get across line. Jory crosses, does not improve from 22nd. Mike Pfeifers gets up to P5, and Dan Tomlinson up into 15, right at the death of the session.
Does indeed. And we're going to go to the grid as we see Jack Dan on pole position with a 119.1, Luca Monroe second, Matt High third, and Ben Brown in fourth position. We'll go down to Mike Pfeiffer's fifth, Staples sixth, Stafer seventh, Stock eighth, Holmes ninth, Mason 10th, Rich 11th, McCardle in 12th. We now go down to Ashhill 13th, Morgan 14th, Dan Tomlinson 15th, Sophie Arrowman 16th, Bottleson 17th, Ashford 18th, Collins 19th, Batowie 20th, Williams 21st, Schroer 22nd, Page 23rd, McLeod 24th, and then Tarrant 25th. Now, Cleaver and Tarrant did not set a lap time, so that may just raise a couple of eyebrows of the stewards. They do ask the drivers when we're racing with oNiD to try and set a representative lap time. Understand if they don't, but however on this occasion it very much looks like those two drivers may just have a quick natter with the race control after the session's ended.
Rhys Tarrant, I think he mentioned he won't be able to make the first race, finishing off some work commitments, but we'll be hoping to be here for race 2.
He has taken to the grid. He may just about make it.
That would be nice, even from the back of the grid. Just make sure they take it safe through the opening lap, not to cause any carnage. Drivers sitting on the grid as we get ready to go for our first feature race. 35 minutes to come. 35 minutes into a bit of the unknown, depending on how much practice these drivers have done on the new tire model. There they came out very recently. The lights come on our screen. 3, 4, 5 red lights. And it's lights out. Away we go. Very poor start from the 113 car. Mike Pfeiffer's dropping down the order. But as we head into T1, Jack Dan per exit has Luca Monroe down the inside. And they're side by side coming out of Old Hall Corner. Down the avenue towards Cascades. Jack Dan now back on the inside, sends it down, and Luca Monroe slots into line. Ben Brown running a little bit wider, loses out to Matt High, but holds on to P4. Dan Tomlinson with a good start, trying to get up into P11, fighting with Sean McArdle, and spin for the leader, and everyone concertinaing up, running into the back of each other.
Oh, it's massive. Still has a pile up. Oh, that's multiple cars. Oh dear. That's not going to go down well with people. Damaged cars left, right and centre. So they'll rejoin the circuit. It will get going again. They'll have to limp back to the pit lane for repairs. We may try and get a replay of that just to see how that all unfolded. That's going to be a bit of a, maybe a blimp kind of replay just to see if we can see and pick apart on how that all unfolded. But that was a big instant for the start of the race, and 5 drivers have elected to go back to the pit lane.
Not the way we wanted to start the races. We see plenty more cars diving into pit lane.
Oh, they're crashing into pit lane. They need to be careful. Right, now that's going to be a word. There were so many cars in the pit lane. That was a torrid race start for most. Now, they'll use up the quick repairs. You have got a quick repair for each race, and that's going to be a very early quick repair for most. But shifted half the field down the order.
More than half the field. I think only the top 9 have avoided that chaos. This is the start. 4 wide as people got mixed sort of reactions off of the grid. Mixed sort of drives. See a collision there. A blue car into an oNiD car. A few cars ending up off at T1. Charlie Morgan involved with that one.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear. I'm going to try and figure out how the leaders ended up. So we'll go follow Jack Dan and the chopper camera.
Yeah, so Luca Monroe goes for the outside, thinks better of it, switches, tries to get to the inside, but the gap was just never there. Spins Jack Dan round, sideways across the middle circuit, and Jack Dan just tries to get going and pretty much runs straight into the side of that oNiD car, whoever they're pushing along with, just being impatient. Like, again, you know, he's maybe frustrated being turned on the first lap, but he's just sort of turned what was his problem into everyone's problem, and is partly why we've had, well, about 16 cars now, 17 cars, as Jory Shore is going through pit lane in the first couple of laps of this race.
He's lost a front wing as well, so he's had an issue somewhere whilst we were looking at the replays. He's lost a front wing. I'm just trying to see if I can find anything on the timing screen. There's nothing showing per se. It has at some point. Oh, I think I may have just found it. Let's see what's happened. Into the final turn. Oh!
Just a little bit wide. Gets on the grass. And it spins them to the inside wall.
They're obscured by the trees there. But does make it back to the pit lane. Does get going once more. But our race leader, believe it or not, is catching some back markers. Yeah.
I'm not surprised that they're catching some back markers with how much of the grid has been through pit lane. Yeah, I think, well, they've seen what happened in front of them, and they were very lucky to avoid it all. Remember, Peter Stather started 7th on the grid, up to the lead. Lewis Mason started P10. Sean McArdle, P12. Sophie Arnwin was down in 16th. Is up 12 positions so far. And Reece Town, who has made this race, up 19 places, has actually worked out very well with them not being able to qualify. So we see a slow car recovering after what can only assume a spin off of the final corner, probably replicating what Yori did a couple of laps ago. I can see Jack Dan already saying fastest lap of the race, trying to recover there, right on the back of Dan Tomlinson, trying to find a way through. Looks like they've been able to get themselves alongside. And we can see on the timing screen, Dan Tomlinson going to try and fight this one back. And Jack Dan has found himself sliding off the grass for not the first time they've had an issue this race. And we're only on the 4th lap.
Oh, he's going to be frustrated to see it goes around. Was that just netcode? There was that looked like
netcode.
That, yeah, wasn't. I didn't see any real contact between the two there. There was space. I'm sure there was space.
Yeah, if we slow it down, we might get a good idea of just how much space there was there. But yeah, definitely looked like from that angle that we saw quickly that there was some space.
Yeah, there's space. Plenty of it. Oh dear. Bad
Yeah,
to worse for... Yeah, just bad to worse for some of these drivers tonight. It's unfortunate,
yeah.
but I'm sure they'll have another race to go through this evening. I'm sure they'll get back onto things and get back up the grid a little while longer. We do have... Actually, one of these races is a reverse grid, isn't it, if I remember correctly?
Yeah. Top 15 in the reverse grid coming up. So Jack Dan, despite having had 2 issues so far this race, is sitting on pole position for next race. So it's not all doom and gloom. And there's still 28 minutes of this race to make up some positions. And we know Jack Dan, very quick driver, you know, they got pole position by over a quarter of a second to the rest of the field. There is still time. You know, the main thing for them is to not let the frustration get to you too much. Just, you know, when you get them to the back of drivers, be a little bit patient. You know, make sure you make a clever move, not something that's going to end up causing another incident and causing more issues. I think Yuri Shore maybe in the background. No, maybe that's another driver having issues at the final corner. It has claimed a few victims so far this race, as Sophie Aronwin is fighting with Ronar Botolfsson over P6. Both these drivers in different classes as well, I believe. Let me just check. No, both of these drivers within the pro class. Both of them having difficult times within the pro class. So they'll be quite happy to find themselves in these positions, fighting within the top 10, not too far from the top 5 as well.
Oh, absolutely. Doing everything right here is Sophie, who's had a bit of a torrid time in previous oNiD races, and I think that chaotic start at the beginning of the race has really helped to get up the order.
Yeah, has indeed. Following through Druid's night. Dirty air, of course, can be a bit of a hindrance. Then we'll have the slipstream towards the final corner. Isn't going to be close enough for a move here, but it's just keeping the pressure on. A little bit of a lockup from Botolfsson, puts them wide onto the grass. Really hinders their momentum, and straight goes through Sophie on the inside, and it'll be moved on before they get to turn 1. Can even come back to the racing line as they break. Botolfsson having to be careful with the dirty air a little bit, making sure not to run into the back of Sophie. Yeah, these two, they won't want to fight too hard, as if they do so, they won't be able to catch up any of the cars in front of them, but they'll also bring some of the cars behind them back into play. Botolfsson trying to go for the slipstream. Sophie defending the inside into the island bend hairpin. Trying to go for a bit of a cutback slide. Struggle for traction for Sophie, putting the power down out of the hairpin towards the second chicane now. Very difficult to make a move in here. The braking zone isn't that long, and the apex quite tight. Doesn't have a lot of space. You know, going for a late move does likely end in an incident. But yeah, Botolfsson now is going to return the favour, try and put the pressure on Sophie and try and force her into a mistake, much like what Botolfsson made last lap.
Yeah, absolutely. Jack Dan, I also want to just notice, made a move back up into P13, managing not to have a netcode issue with another car like he did last time out. But he's up in position, so let's see if I can get that on a replay. Have a look. Well, you will be able to. As, oh, we'll go to half speed. Is always... Try that again. Here's Jack Dan. Oh, I think that was a pass because there was a spin from the car he's overtaken of Jory. Again, sadly, dropping down the order as Jory, and that's a move done.
Yeah, we've seen how difficult these cars can be so far this season. The tire model, if anything, appears to be making them a little more difficult, or maybe our drivers just haven't quite adapted to them as of yet. Jack Dan, Mike Pfeiffer's both getting track limit warnings on the outside of T1 there, but our leader Peter Stather has fallen into strife as we see a replay of this move. Jack Dan down the inside of Mike Pfeiffer's. That looks to be. Yeah, just trying to see. Yeah, that was move for P13. But Peter Stather from the lead has made a mistake, dropped down to second place.
I have an answer for how he did it. It's into the last turn. I think dipped a couple of... No, it was for the fast right-hander. I do stand corrected. Of the second sector. Almost having a bigger issue. Is able to save it. Gets back on circuit. Regains second position. But that is race lead change for for Stafford dropping down to second. He's gonna have to work back and try and catch back up to Lewis Mason.
Yeah, just dipped a couple of wheels onto the grass on the entry to Jurds. Never helps, he runs out wide as Williams looks maybe to have made a mistake and has allowed Philip Staples through for P8. Adrian Rich also having an issue of themselves, dropping down the order just outside of the reverse grid, top 15. So more struggles for drivers up and down the grid so far. Gobal Bring for the top 3. Nigel Stock going for a move on Sean McGardle. Looks to have got that done cleanly as they headed up to Jurds using Slipstream. And it seems like Sean McGardle not fighting that one too hard. As we see here, Nigel Stock with the momentum gets to the inside and much braver on the brakes. Sean McGardle being somewhat cautious seemingly there. Look how much time they dropped through Jurds alone and has actually come into the pits. I wonder if Sean McGardle has picked up some damage because the car might have been crabbing there. It seems like it might have been.
Potentially. The battle for 6th and 5th, however, still ongoing as has a lot of inside curb there from Bottleson. Risks upsetting the car though if he's not careful. And still trying to chase down. Oh no, he's not trying to chase down. He's had a spin through turn 2. And that is Rear saying, what the hell are you doing? Why are you turning so quickly? I do not like this at all. You're going to start facing the wrong way.
We're going to need a counter for how many times people have spun this race over the qualifying session. Though I don't even think with the counter we could keep up with just how often people are losing the rear end. Peter Stather, trying to come back after the recent mistake, is closing up to the back of Lewis Mason. Gap within half a second now. Can they get a good exit? It looked a little wider from Lewis Mason, dipping a couple of wheels into the grass. And we're going to go on board with our previous race leader before they give it up with that mistake. A little bit of a tighter exit through T1. That'll likely be a track cut for Lewis Mason as they run a little bit wide. A full second quicker last lap for Peter. Just showing how much more pace they have. Oh, they should be able to get themselves back into lead. It'll just be a matter of doing it cleanly. Terry Williams has had an issue as they were trying to fend off Dan Tomlinson and Jack Dan for P11. Both those drivers go through, and Jack Dan is now trying to get past Dan Tomlinson. Not for the first time this race. Hopefully will be a little more successful, these two drivers. But we might say they had a little coming together. It might have just been netcode. They get very close to each other coming into T1. This time, though, no collision. Very clearly this time. And Jack Dan up to P11 has 6.5 seconds to try and chase down Charlie Morgan. Remember, he was involved in that T1 incident at the start of the race. Mike Pfeiffer is also trying to recover. Is up to P12. Gets their way through past Dan Tomlinson. He will now have to settle for P13.
Yep, that's smooth, done and dusted. Joey Scores had another instance, sadly, down the bottom of the order. It's been a bit of a torrid race for him. He's not liking this car and track combination. And it's a slide through. Oh, that's... Hold the brakes. Oh. Nothing wrong. Well, he did do something wrong. He had a spin, but he didn't do anything wrong after the incident. Held the brakes and just tried to remain predictable and not cause a rolling roadblock in another instance. So props to him for remaining safe, but a bit of an annoying race for him, I am sure. And another race to follow will hopefully change his fortunes.
Well, indeed, as we see Ben Holmes off at the hairpin. nearly find themselves going down the international circuit.
Oh, that's
See,
contact.
ooh, into the back of trying to figure out which driver that is. They've gone into the back of.
We've lost rear wing, and there again. Ooh. Who in the world is that going slowly? Trying to figure it out myself. I can't quite figure it out. But we'll be going to the pit, so we'll have our answer in a few moments' time, I reckon. But there's a change for the lead as Stather gets back past Lewis Mason.
Good run over the final corner, used slipstream, got to the inside. Easy move done, nice and cleanly. We'll now try and break open a bit of a gap. Has actually had a poor run through Cascades with the slipstream. This Mason is maybe going to try and come back into the hairpin. Has got himself alongside Peter. He's going to have to leave the room with the wide line. And we'll try and get the better exit once again. Reese Tarrant is into the pit. So I wonder if that was our casualty from Ben Holmes's little accident. And Sophie Aronwin is also having a couple of issues of her own, falling down the order a bit. But Lewis Mason back into the lead. Not going to make it easy. Even if they don't quite have the pace of Peter Stather, they're not giving this lead up.
They're not. It's tucking right underneath the rear wing in the background. That's a back marker. I believe that is... I'm going to try and get a car number as they go past again. But that Jaguar, is that Ash Hill?
That is Matt High,
Matt
currently
High.
down in 16th place. Will be trying to unlap themselves as these two fight. Peter Stather back in front, but Lewis Mason better exit, trying to get any slipstream they can, sending it down the inside. But Peter Stather just holds the momentum round the outside, and they will stay in front as Peter Stather closed in to the apex. Will now have the decision of, do they let Matt High through, or do they put all of their focus on Peter Stather in front? There is a bit of a strategy to letting Matt High through, who has a wobble on the brakes, nearly repeating what Ben Holmes did a couple of laps ago. Luckily avoids the collision, does drop them back a little bit, and allows, maybe giving Lewis Mason a bit of a scare, allows them to put their full attention back onto Peter Stather. As we see Sophie through final corner, a bit wide for the apex, struggling with the rear end, and goes for a little slip and slide into the runoff. Luckily avoiding the barrier, so quite a bit of time loss there, but shouldn't have any damage, barring that of the tyres sliding across the track.
Indeed.
But back to this battle. They'll slide there for this. Mason, Matt High running a bit wider than the two leaders, maybe pushing a little bit more to try and catch up, maybe a little more confident with the car. But Peter Stather, now that they're in front, once again, they're going to be trying to just break the gap, not allow this Mason to follow in their footsteps, in their slipstream, and to put another pass on that may slow both of them down. A little wide for this Mason there. Another track limit warning. Drivers will have to be careful they don't pick up a drive-through penalty for instant points throughout this race. As we see, Mike Pfeiffer's has had a bit of an issue through Knickerbrick Corner, I suspect. Is going a little bit slowly. That's Dan Tomlinson through.
I thought it was just a move, and Dan, I think it went wide a little bit there, did Pfeiffer's, and allows Dan Tomlinson to go, hello, there's a gap there, I'm going to go for it.
Yeah, odd mistake there. Jack dancing a new fastest lap of the race, as in front Sophie Aronwin and Charlie Morgan are having a fight, and is going to get themselves involved to the outside of Cascades. Is going to try and hang it the long way round Charlie Morgan, who's still holding on the inside. It's going to be roles reversed as they get to the hairpin, but Jack Dan maybe thinking, can I get to the inside? Sophie, no, it's not. Charlie Morgan loses it under braking, being too late, and takes out Sophie, who's now facing the wrong way. And thankfully, a couple of cars are able to find a gap to get their way through. We don't have the road blocked like it was on lap one. But yeah, a bit clumsy there from Charlie Morgan. As we see Mason taking a little adventure across the grass at the final corner, down to P3 now.
And that's not going to help his cause. He was already in P3. It was just the fact he went too deep at the final turn. but crucially keeps it out the barrier, just about enough grip on the grass with slick tyres to slide the car back onto the racing circuit, and gets away with it. Lives to fight another day.
Thing is, this Mason had a moment before that dropped them from second to third behind Nigel's stock. So a couple of issues for them on that lap. Maybe they're starting to struggle with the tyres, as we see a battle for P9 here. Dan Tomlinson trying to fend off Mike Pfeiffer's, who's closed up nearly 3/10 that lap for Mike, putting the pressure on but not able to get themselves alongside as they swing the cars in to Cascades. Here is Lewis Mason's first mistake.
Yeah,
we've seen this already. This is the mistake Stather made to lose the lead in the previously. Now Lewis Mason has made it following Stather, just dipping the wheels onto grass as they turn in.
Yeah, we'll stay with it into the final turn. This is where they had their second off. Dirty tyres. That's what they've done it. And
dirty tyres indeed.
Just salt to the wound. As we jump back to Pfeiffer's and Tomlinson side by side. There's a car crash in the background. That was Rich. 20th position, facing the wrong way in the final sector. And indeed, he is dropping time. I think he's got going again once more. Thank goodness. But Pfeiffer's makes moves on Dan Tomlinson. We'll go back to that battle. Dan Tomlinson down, look up the inside of the final turn. They give each other space. Almost wheel-to-wheel contact. The outside line will become the inside for turn one if Dan Tomlinson can hold it. He can't. He tucks back behind the slipstream of that 113 car of Pfeiffer's into turn one and lives to fight another day.
Drivers fighting on.
Oh.
As to the inside again goes Dan Tomlinson, door left open by Mike Pfeiffer's, but again they just hold it round the outside, carry the momentum and hold on to the position, and we'll have the inside for the hairpin, which is probably the favoured line for the much slower corner.
Yes.
But yeah, seeing at the sort of medium to high speed corners of Oulton Park, you don't necessarily want to be on the inside. So a lot of times the outside proving to be the better line.
Yeah, absolutely. That slower hairpin proving a very good overtaking opportunity. And despite the shorter nature of the circuit, it's giving drivers quite an interesting way to make a move instead of having a banked hairpin on the full international circuit. We'll jump to Sean McArdle, who's just fighting away with Bottleson for position. Into the final 10, they're fighting away, and for now they remain status quo. Jack Dan, new fastest lap, 119.6, up into 8th. Good recovery drive from Jack, and gets past Ashford for position as well. So that is another position done and dusted, and a bit of what's the word? Stopping the sink from stopping the ship from sinking. Kind of what am I trying to think? There's a phrase for it. Damage control. There we go.
Damage limitation.
Damage limitation. Thank you. That was on the tip of my tongue. It was.
And the job is not done in that regard for Jack Dan. 2.5 seconds behind Philip Staples, who is in turn 3.5 seconds from this battle that we are watching, with still 10.5 minutes to go. Plenty of laps to continue chase down, especially when Jack Dan is sort of on a bit of a string of saying fastest lap. So I swear I've seen like 3 different 119.6s from Jack Dan that have been the fastest lap of the race, just showing their consistency that they have despite the lap 1 incident. I imagine they did repair that damage. Well, they did come into the pits to repair it, but the tyres obviously not that damaged from that incident. Let's see. Sean McArdle, 120.9. Jack Dan, 119.8, just over a second quicker. Jack Dan carries that pace on, and P4 is within his grasps.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see if we're going to follow. We can jump to Jack Dan very briefly. Let's see. Let's have a look. See if we're quite soon. Don't think we have quite enough data to do this, because the gap was ebbing and flowing, and yeah, of course that gap's not going to quite work out, sadly, because there's just not enough data from him being in 7th position, but he is catching, and that's the main thing. Arrowans has had an issue, however, drops a position to, that was Reese Taron, goes through the hairpin. Oh, that's a wobble and a wiggle, and saves it from going into the barrier. That could have been so far worse.
Yeah, not first time we've seen Sophie having a wiggle trying to put the power down out of that hairpin. This time was a bit worse. Thankfully, it didn't end in too many tears. Did lose a position, but could have been much worse. Jack Dan now coming up to the line. 120.9 from Sean McArdle leave the train. Closed in a little bit by Bertolfsson, but 120.0 for Jack Dan. 9 tenths gained this lap. 4.5 tenths on Philip Staples. Give it another 3 laps and they should be on the back of Philip Staples, and not much longer and they'll be behind this group for P4, but ultimately that does depend a little bit on how much these two are going to be fighting. Ben Brown getting up past Charlie Morgan for 13th in their recovery drive after the hairpin incident of lap 1, but we'll continue on board here with Bertolfsson. Drivers get as close as they dare to the tyre bundles on the apex of the chicane. Looks like Sean McArdle, good exit out of Knickerbrick Corner through Clay Hill and towards Sturds. Doesn't look like they're sort of too worried. They're not making any mistakes. They're sort of nice and comfortable. The pressure from Bertolfsson not too intense. But I have to imagine if Jack Dan does get onto the back of these two, that pressure will be much more significant.
Will be indeed. Just a brief moment to go. Charlie Morgan, all the way down in 14th, has had a little bit of an adventure. Goes back and rejoins the circuit. No harm, no foul. Maybe just a bit of damage of pride, let's say.
So we're getting into the closing stages of this race. 6 laps to go. That's Sean McArdle breaking themselves into the hairpin, getting onto the grass and going for a bit of a spin. Drops them down from P4 to P7. As then, they're not too far under pressure. But Bertolfsson hadn't really closed up in the corner, so we were looking away from them. Just playing out breaks them, turns into the hairpin, but a couple of wheels onto the grass. Spins them round. That is not going to do the tyres any favours. Now it's Bertolfsson in P4, but Jack Dan has gone to the back of Philip Staples. Pressure is on.
It is indeed. They've got a lap car between Staples and Bertolfsson, so the battle here is probably the best position that Jack Dan can potentially make up and back into 5th. And it says, oh, it's a nudge. Oh, it's bigger contact. What in the world? That was Baton for Terry. Having a bit of a random incident. Actually, no, it was. Who was the car behind him? Who was that? Car 91.
That was Philip Staples. So Fortois just had a moment getting onto power out of the final corner, had a big snap of oversteer, and the only way you're saving that snap is if you come off the throttle. Philip Staples, maybe a little too focused on the car that they were side by side with, didn't quite notice this. So Jack Dan on the outside of Philip Staples. You can see the big
we missed the moment from Terry, that's why.
Yeah, that moment I was talking about, and yeah, Philip Staples just not able to react in time, probably worried about the car that was, on the grass on their outside, being Jack Dan. So unfortunately, both those drivers coming strife. Staples already having used their quick repair and losing a lot more positions as Richard Ashford and Mike Pfeiffer's have come to strife at Knickerbrick Corner.
Yeah, completely missed that moment from Baton on the exit. That's why he was slow. That's probably why he got caught out and got collected by the car behind. Car 7, Ashford going round, and that is Pfeiffer's. Oh, wow!
That that's open wheels for you. You could see from the moment Ashford turned into Knickerbrick Corner, the rear end was just starting to slide with how aggressively he turned in. Pfeiffer's tried to avoid it as he was spinning in front of them, and just the rear wheels clipped together, throwing Pfeiffer's up towards the air. Does hit the wall a bit. But I'm surprised does not have more damage than what he does. Well, don't know how bad the suspension damage is. That is crabbing quite badly, so significant suspension damage. They're into the pits. So is Sophie Irwin. They must have had issues themselves. They're heading to pit exit. Luckily, they weren't involved in lap 1 melee, so they haven't used their they hadn't used their quick repair, so they get to take advantage of that now. They come out in 13th, just in front of Charlie Morgan. They'll be hoping to hold on to 13th position as Mike Pfeiffer's into the pits. Mike gonna fall out of the reverse grid here, unfortunately for them, same as Philip Staples, as Jack Dan looks to the inside of Bob Tolfson, who's not fighting that one too hard, lets them through. And Jack Dan, after that opening lap instant, is up into P4. Whether they will stay in P4, though, it might be subject to a post-race investigation, depending on their involvement in that one instant.
But commentators curse, what you doing? No, I'm joking. He'll be fine.
We'll see about that.
We'll see. He might spin again. But yes, post-race stewarding in effect for the majority of our oNiD championships. And so all race results are provisional. And we do get a 24-hour time frame to submit a report. And then we do review those and get those over to the drivers and apply penalties where needed.
Charlie Morgan fighting Sophie Irwin for 13th place. Looks like they've got the move done with 2.5 minutes left in the race. Sophie actually making a mistake, or had just come out of the pits on the last lap. That's why their time was so slow. Matt High also getting themselves in front of Terry Williams for P11. Terry, bit of an issue there on the brakes. Car behind closing up an awful lot. Terry Williams is going to let them through, as I think that is one of our leaders making their way through.
Yeah, it is.
That is
the race leader. So Peter Scott, another 2 laps inclusive of this one?
Yes, penultimate lap that they're on now. One more once they get to the end of it here. A nice 4.5 second lead over Nigel Stock behind as we go back to this battle. Sophie Irwin trying to fight back on Charlie Morgan, trying to send it the long way round of Jerds. Don't tip the grass, which they haven't done, but Charlie Morgan has just held on the inside this time. Will it be a fight into the final corner? Charlie Morgan sweeping back onto the racing line. Bit risky there, putting Sophie into the dirty air, but they get away with it. They're coming now to start the final lap of the race. Slipstream Sophie not close enough, doesn't go for a move into T1. As long as these drivers keep it clean, they should have the reverse grid. Ben Holmes 30 seconds back. Well, still want to avoid any contact. A little bit wider of Charlie Morgan pushing as they try and hold on to the position. Will get a track limit point, but they must have some to spare, given that they're pushing that hard. They also have, I believe, Luca Monroe behind them, thinking about unlapping themselves. But Sophie will be hoping that they just stay line astern for this final lap, as they are 2 teammates, part of United Sim Team.
Oh no!
As Sophie losing the rear end, turning in for Knickerbrick. We've seen the same mistake not too long ago from Ashford. They've done themselves a hold on to 14th with that big margin they have back to Ben Holmes, but it does mean they are out of contention for 13th place, unless Charlie Morgan makes a mistake themselves in the final couple of corners, but that is doubtful. But out of the final corner now, from 7th on the greatest start of this race, they kept out of the lap 1 carnage, and they will take the feature race win. Peter Stather, well done taking that victory.
Absolutely. Then be Lewis Mason for P3. A good result from him, and it'll be followed by this man here, Mr. Jack Dan. And what recovery drive it has been from him, up to 4th, losing the lead, or losing the lead battle, should I say, on the first lap. Half hour later, he finds himself just outside, well, I say just outside, 25 seconds outside the podium position. It'll be Bottleston, then Tomlinson, there'll be Taron, Mercado, all being well. There's still a couple of little battles here, there, up and down the grid, but I think everything else is relatively as it is. A nice little weave across the line for Taron. He's going to get that sorted, as only got the last couple of cars. You can see the checkered line with Ben Brown, Richard Ashford, and Matt High in 11th position. And that, folks, is race 1 done and dusted. We get to do it all over again, albeit ever so slightly reversed.
Yeah, very eventful first race, very eventful opening lap of the race. Does not bode well for the 25-minute sprint race coming up, where we will be reversing the top 15. That means Ben Holmes will be on pole position with Sophie Arnwin alongside them. I'm sure we can go through the full grid in a moment's time. But yeah, some good recovery drives there, mainly from Jack Dan back up to P4. I mean, we had all but the top 9 pitting, either towing themselves back to pit lane or driving themselves into pit lane at the end of lap 1. Out of a 24 car field, that's 15 cars through pit lane on lap 1.
Tis indeed, I can tell you. We are just going to a warm-up session of about, I think, 5 minutes, and it'll then allow the server just to change over, and everyone gets to go back out for another 5 minutes or so and enjoy the circuit a bit more quieter, just to go back out and just reacclimatise everything as we do wait for the next grid to form. I'm just seeing, can we drag anyone in? Is there anyone available to drag and to have a quick natter with? I don't think there is, sadly. They're all hiding away in the voice channels in the oNiD Discord and staying well away from the comms booth so they don't get a grilling. So I can't blame them, to be fair. I don't blame them. Who would want to talk to us, Scotty? Ugh.
I imagine quite a few of the drivers be keen on talking to us after that first race. But yeah, second race coming up. A lot of drivers will want to put things right after that first race if they weren't able to recover in the race itself. But yeah, you have to imagine now, with sort of a little more than half of the grid being reversed, yeah, it's going to be very, very interesting. But yeah, Charlie Morgan's just posted a photo on our Discord of them, I think, just clipping one of the tires stacks at the chicane with their front left wheel, and presumably maybe getting some suspension damage from that, as they say, rip my front wheel. Fine margins. Charlie Morgan just putting themselves on the wrong side of those margins. But they were certainly far from the only driver to pick up damage throughout that race.
Yeah, absolutely. Quite interesting moments as well. A couple of netcode. We try to avoid it, and I'm sure everyone within the server has got relatively good internet. So we would certainly hope. But yeah, just unfortunate, especially with Jack Dan as well. That netcode spin really put a nail in the coffin. I say nail in the coffin. He did get up to 4th, so I think that's the best he could have got from the race. But maybe could have got closer to those top 3 positions if he had the chance to do so, if it weren't for that little excursion in the middle of the race.
Yeah, indeed. But plenty of people having offs themselves, plenty of people losing the rear end. Of course, we haven't mentioned yet today, it is, as a reminder, fixed setup, so nothing the drivers can do to balance the car to their liking. They have to adapt their driving to not just the car setup, but the new tyre model. And that's another thing with the new tyre model. The balance of the car might have slightly shifted, which means that the setup isn't really as ideal as it used to be for weeks prior for how the tyres are performing, which might be partly why we're seeing more drivers sort of struggling throughout the qualifying and race that we've had so far.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll keep an eye on that. A bit of a shorter race, maybe a bit of a saving grace for these guys. 25 minutes for the final race this evening. But with that element of the top 13 reverse. Top 13? Top 13, yes.
Top 15.
Top 15. 15, ignore me. There we go. At least someone knows what they're talking about. So we just await for the warm-up to finish and we'll get to the grid for race 2. Only about 20 seconds left on the 5-minute warm-up session, and the cars will be then booted back to pits, and then they'll go again for the gridding of second race this evening.
They will indeed. And we sometimes do get caught out by how sort of quickly the warm-up session can end and the drivers putting themselves on the grid to start the second race. So let us go through that grid order for the sprint race coming up. As I did mention, Ben Holmes from 15th in race 1 will be starting on pole position alongside Sophie Aronwin on the front row. Charlie Morgan and Terry Williams will roll off row 2. Matt High in P5 ahead of Richard Ashford in P6. Ben Brown will roll off P7, have Sean McArdle in P8, Rhys Tarrant in P9, Dan Tomlinson in P10. But Thompson will be in P11 with Jack Dan in P12. Not too different to the place they were after the opening lap of race 1 for the feature race. So there'll be quite a similar race for them. Hopefully they'll maybe get themselves a little further up. Lewis Mason will be in 13th with Nigel Stock in 14th, and our race 1 winner Peter Stather in P15. Collins will roll off 16th. Jar Page, I talked about being surprised by the race starting. We've already started into T1. Ben Holmes has held on to the lead, head of Sophie Aronwin in second as they come through. It looks like it's been much cleaner this time around, though we've had a couple of drivers not make the grid, although I say that Terry Williams flying down the order. I wonder if they've had an issue at Cascades, and there they are slowly rejoining into the hairpin here.
Oh,
Tire smoke, wings flying into the air. Has not been a clean hairpin, unfortunately. Losing their rear wing, one of the oNiD cars, trying to see which, trying to pick out which one that is. 77, that's Dan Tomlinson. So it would be, unfortunately, they've had a very unfortunate turn of events through a lot of weeks we've had so far. So they'll be very disappointed to have another one. But they're trying to hold on best they can and drag the car round to the pit lane where they will be able to pit and repair the damage. Sophie Aronwin falling down the order there just as we cut away. But into the hairpin, much different braking zones, and as Concertine is up, the driver behind them just running right into the back of Dan Tomlinson. Couldn't quite pick out who that was.
Oh, Dan can't get into the pits. He's crowded.
Oh, that's so unfortunate. The 56 car, I think that's Luca Monroe. Yeah, it is indeed. Just blocking Dan Tomlinson from getting over to pit lane. Nothing they're doing wrong. But yeah, that's very unfortunate. Sophie Aronwin has had an issue, dropped down to 20th place, having started on the front row. As more contact at the hairpin, Dan Tomlinson spinning off, probably with lack of rear wing, but looks like more people have been involved or have had to at least scatter. Adrian Rich, I think, involved as well, as they've maybe fallen so far into the runoff that the timing screen was registering them a little further along the lap than they actually were. Let's see a replay here into the hairpin. Sophie Aronwin just making the same mistake we've seen from a couple of our leading drivers last race, dipping a couple of wheels onto the grass as they enter Druids, and being the opening lap will drop back down the order. Jar Page and Adrian Richard have had a coming together coming out of Knickerbrick corner. And here we can see Jack Page spinning the car around in the runoff area. I'm talking by Jack Dan starting down in P12 for this race. Well, they're already back up to P4. It didn't take them nearly as long as it did in the first race. 1.5 seconds off of the podium place as Ben Brown sets the fastest lap of the race, trying to chase down Matt High and Ben Holmes for a potential win. Quite a few cars running wide there out of turn 1, all of them picking up track limit violations as Peter Stather leads this train in P7 of Sean McArdle. Nigel Stock and Mike Pfeiffer's runs a little bit wide, compromises their momentum, and to the outside goes Sean McArdle, who's going to try and go the long way round of this tight hairpin. Can he do it? Not quite. Pfeiffer's trying to go around the outside of Nigel Stock, carries the momentum and sweeps across the nose very aggressively there to defend the position into the chicane. Sean Peter Stather has got themselves back in front of Sean McArdle and is trying to break away. Half a second opened up the gap, and Mike Pfeiffer's immediately drawing their attention to Sean McArdle, closing up. Will they go for a move into George? They have a look to the inside, but they're not there. They're not alongside, and they'll have to wait for another opportunity. Thankfully, Nigel Stock isn't quite close enough to capitalise on Mike Pfeiffer's compromising their line into George's corner there, and will be will not have too much pressure in the braking zone for the final corner. Cross line for another time. Jack Dan takes fastest lap for the race as they try and chase down the top 3 as more track limit violations on the exit of T1, and this train is getting that much longer. Ashford has joined and has brought Luca Monroe and Lewis Mason onto the back of it as well. Monroe getting themselves in front of Ashford, who's had a very poor exit out of Cascades, and through goes Lewis Mason as well. But Lewis on the grass, braking for the hairpin, gets the car gathered up again, but does lose place to Ashford once again. We'll have to make that move in slipstream. They're thinking about a move towards the chicane. Are they gonna send it? It wouldn't be too wise, I would say, as they slot back into line, especially as a driver, Sean McArdle, out of line at the front of this group. Mike Pfeiffer's has got away from the group. Sean McArdle sort of being the bottleneck of this. Ben Holmes runs wide through Jared. Matt High gets to the inside and will take the lead of this race. Ben Holmes now having to look in the rear view mirror as Ben Brown and Jack Dan getting very close together through the final corner. Jack Dan trying to send it round the outside of Ben Brown and to take the final position. They're still side by side into the final corner, and contact. Jack Dan spinning into the wall is going to pop the rear wing off of the tire wall and will have to come through the pits to repair their damage. Similar instant as what we saw between them and Dan Tomlinson in the first race at this corner that they're coming into now. Cascades. Jack Dan fighting the rear end, sliding off, and is just going to, has towed to the pits. Let's just get a heli cam of that. Oh, the contact very early at the turn-in point. Maybe Jack Dan just expecting Ben Brown to turn in a little earlier than they did. You can hardly say that it was sort of too late of a turn-in from Ben Brown. Yeah, I would say maybe Jack Dan just turning in a little bit too early for having a car on their inside. And unfortunately, they have paid the consequence of that. Ben Brown has dropped down the order a bit with that side-by-side, not down the order, but dropped back from the leading pair with that side-by-side battle, as we see Reese Tarn trying to get to the inside of Charlie Morgan, unable to carry the momentum out of Druids, and Charlie Morgan is going to hold on to that 4th place that they've now inherited from that lap 1 incident. Across the start-finish line now to finish lap 5 of the race. 7 minutes in, the battle still close up and down the field for Toy, getting in front of Ashford, who has come into pit lane. They must have had an issue of sorts, or repairing some damage from a little moment that they had. But Reese Tarn, good momentum out of Cascades here. Charlie's going to defend the inside. Much later on the brakes is Reese Tarn as they try and hold it round the outside here. But as we've seen throughout all of our races so far, it is just too long of a way to go round the tight hairpin, and they'll have to be waiting for another opportunity for restarting.
Always down. Well, it would help to get my words out. It's always dangerous. Oh, is that? That's Ben Holmes.
In the gravel on the exit of Knickerbrig Corner, finds a gap that they just about get the car through to rejoin the track.
Just on his own. Matt Hyde takes the lead, almost got collected by the spinning car of Ben Holmes. He now finds himself dropped down the order in P13. He's going to rejoin, or hopefully rejoin the back of the train in the race of P8. There's about a 5-car train, or P7 should I say, about a 5-car train for that position, all fighting away. There's Luca Monroe that leads that train. God, that's so unfortunate for him.
Yeah, I mean, how many people have we seen make the same mistake, whether at that exact same corner or somewhere else around the lap? Ooh, running very wide there was Lewis Mason, flirting with the track limits as Charlie Morgan has got a move done on restarting and is now up to the podium place, taking advantage of the mistake from Ben Holmes as Dan Tomlinson finds himself off onto the grass at Druids Corner along with Jarrett Page.
Let's see what happened. I think there may have been a slight nudge between the two. Goes to the inside of the set. Oh, is that netcode again?
Hard to tell from that angle if the wheels maybe were interlocking or if there's wheel-to-wheel contact. Either way, Dan Tomlinson trying to get to the inside of Jarrett Page into Druids has not paid off, with both cars going off for a little adventure. We'll go on board here with Dan Tomlinson. They're looking and looking for the gap here. The gap is just about there, and I think that was just a little too late to try and send it in, try and force their way through. So, yeah, Dan Tomlinson not doing themselves any favours as we see the red markers pop up to notify us that everyone has ran wide through turn 1 once again. And maybe even running wide through Cascades as well, as they all fight in the train for 7th place behind Luca Monroe, who's trying to break away from Sean McArdle, who has seemingly been the cork in the bottle for quite a few of the cars, and maybe is so. This Mason trying to get a move through the hairpin on Sean McArdle. Is that round the outside? Trying to see Sean on. Yeah, Sean has held it round the outside and will actually hold on to the place in front of Lewis Mason for P8. This is going to have to try another attempt. Maybe Dan won't be too brave and open the door for Nigel Stock to find, to poke their nose up alongside. I'll have to wait for their opportunities. They head into Druids, making sure not to put any wheels onto the grass as they turn in, but getting onto that white line nevertheless. Side by side, a little further in front, just seen Peter Stather trying to look to the inside of Restarn into the final corner, but didn't commit to the move. See this battle over P4. Pfeiffer's closing up to Stathers at that sort of that look that they had into the final corner. He's got to look to the inside, and again the driver's just coming together on turn-in. Stather is going to be able to carry on, but Restarn facing the wrong way in the gravel, it's going to lose much more time.
Oh dear, oh dear, oh dear, that's not what you wanted to see. Let's see how that happened unfolded on the inside. Oh yeah, turned in. There was a gap, then there suddenly wasn't. That's not gonna help Peter's car there. He may have damage. He looks to be getting actually away reasonably well, but I think that front wing is slightly tweaked. So how much of that is going to be an issue for performance, I'm not entirely sure, but for now he is continuing, and we'll look to continue and regain some positions.
Sean McArdle holding an offensive line into and through George, holding that tight inside line. This Mason pops over for a bit of slipstream before looking to the outside into the final corner. How hard are they going to commit to the outside here? Not that much. Maybe thinking a bit of a cutback, but again, Sean McArdle just holding tight to the inside, though not here. This Mason will get their nose to the inside as they head into the first corner and absolutely sends it in, gets themselves in front, and Sean McArdle runs a little bit wide. Look at this train in the background of everyone trying to look for an opportunity to pass the car in front, nearly going 3 wide into Cascades here. How that didn't end in contact, I do not know. The drivers have done very well there, as Ben Brown has made a mistake at the hairpin, trying to fight for the lead with Matt High. Luckily will retain P2 as they had the gap over Charlie Morgan. Nigel Stock trying to look to the inside of Philip Staples. I think might actually have been passed by Philip Staples round the outside, as all these drivers are just stuck in this battle. They're trying to fight the driver in front of them, but at the same time they have to be looking in the rearview mirrors at the drivers trying to attack them. Matt High a little bit wide out of Cascades as we come to this replay, and Ben Brown ever so slightly touching the grass. I'm so surprised that was enough to spin the car around under braking, but just shows how much these drivers are on the limit. Literally like 1 centimeter of the tire on the grass, the rest still on the tarmac, and the car goes spinning round. Charlie Morgan has found their way up to P2 in front of Ben Brown, as Ben Holmes is having more issues into the grass, into the wall, it looks like, coming out of the final corner. Wonder if they were assisted there or whether they did that on their own efforts, and will take a trip through pit lane to repair the damage. Has become a little bit too much for them. Can see how bent the front wing, the car crabbing to some extent. We've got a replay here, just loses the rear end trying to put the power on out of the final corner, and a bonk into the wall. You can see the damage on the front wing. They'll in pit lane and out they come. They'll stay on the lead lap, luckily for them, as we just seen Jack Page spun there on the exit of the chicane. Looks like maybe they had a spin trying to put down the power out of that chicane. Sort of similar to mistake to what we're seeing at the final corner. Adrian Rich has returned to pit lane as well, having had some issues that we've not seen. But now Ben Brown really, sorry, not Ben Brown. Ben Brown caught up behind Charlie Morgan here, having been passed last lap, and that is backing him up into Mike Pfeiffer, who has tried to send it down the inside, committed to the move, unable to back out. Ben Brown has just closed the gap down, and both of the cars have taken a little adventure. Well, Mike Pfeiffer has got away with that, but it's going to have Luca Monroe down the inside, leaves him the space. Maybe not quite enough space left on the outside, but Pfeiffer's still there and slots back into line, and sending it down the inside is Ben Brown. Maybe not so happy at what occurred at the final corner. Takes back the position, but will only be P4 as Luca Monroe has taken advantage. Sean McArdle sliding off into the grass. We'll hopefully get a replay of what happened there, but Charlie Morgan checking out of that battle with P2. As we just cut a little bit late on the replay to Sean McArdle rejoining and letting a couple of cars through. Here's the entry here. Is that Jack Dan on the inside trying to... Yeah, it was. And that's Jack Dan trying to unlap themselves there. So hard to tell, if... drivers are allowed to unlap themselves as long as they make the move cleanly. It looks like Jack Dan might have got themselves alongside, and then just not expecting the move, Sean turned in and didn't leave the space. Ben Brown, Mike Pfeiffer's at it once again at the final corner. A bit more wheel-to-wheel contact, and that's going to allow... that's Dan Tomlinson behind, who is lapped and has got up not to pass Ben Brown. But yeah, been tough few laps for Ben Brown as they've dropped from P2 all the way down to P5.
Yeah, that's been a couple of torrid laps for Ben. He's not going to be happy. I think he's going to be a bit steamy under the corner. It's a car spinning. That's Mason.
Slightly collects the wall. The front wing faced through the tire a little bit, so don't know whether iRacing will have assigned damage to them. Ben Brown sideways on the exit of the hairpin. Wonder if there's contact in that. We'll see. Mason just runs out too wide, gets onto the grass, loses the rear end all by themselves. No one else to blame but themselves. Ben Brown here just loses the rear end, turning into the hairpin, maybe just locking the rear brakes ever so slightly, struggling with the tires. Has had a couple of moments on those tires, a couple of slides, and as Ben Brown was mentioning to me during our round at Snetterton a couple of weeks ago, when you have a slide on the tires, that is when you start to struggle on them. That is when you really suffer. Even if you don't have any wall contact or any other damage to the car, you can just lose pace and lose stability in the car from those mistakes. And it seems that attribute has carried over to the new tyre model. And Ben Brown is actually going to come into the pits. Maybe he has a bit of suspension damage after the contact they had with the aggressive fighting they had with Mike Pfeiffer's, let's just say. And Lewis Mason coming into the pits as well, maybe has picked up some damage themselves from that moment. So we look to Jack Dan, who is in front of Dan Tomlinson, fighting Dan Tomlinson for position, while they have the number 91 car of Philip Staples right behind him. And Dan Tomlinson looking to the inside. These two are fighting side by side when they've got P5 behind him, trying to hold off a pack of 3, nearly 4 cars. Looking to the inside, contact between Dan Tomlinson and Jack Dan. Dan Tomlinson, both of them going back to pit lane, which is going to be a very nice sight for Philip Staples, as they were starting to get a bit worried at the cars behind him starting to make moves. Stather was thinking about moving into the chicane, but decided better of it as they watched the cars coming together in front of them. Luca Monroe has got up to the back of Charlie Morgan and is putting the pressure on with 6 minutes left in the race. Luca Monroe in the slipstream towards T1, trying to go for P2 here.
R&D through turn 1 they go. He gets a good run. So I've looked inside contact between the two drivers. There's even more contact, more wheel banging between the two. It's hip and shoulder. Morgan's going to fight that, but it will have to concede to Monroe, who gets a move done up the inside. Wheel to wheel contact. They get away with it. So dangerous to make contact like that in these open wheel cars. If you interlock wheels, if you do anything wrong whilst going side by side like that, it could. And we have seen it end in absolute disaster.
Matt Cleafer trying to fight Peter Stather for P6 has dropped a couple of places to P8. As we see Monroe now trying to open that gap up to Charlie Morgan. Matt High nearly 8 seconds up the road with only 5 minutes left in the race. You can't imagine Monroe is going to be able to close that gap in. These two drivers were second and third on the grid, so the pace difference between them probably not going to be that significant.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll stick with it for now. Morgan will yield a position and remains in third. Pfeiffer's in fourth, isn't too far behind. A real battle, 5th and 6th is brewing. That's Stather and Staples, as Aaron's had an issue, and so is Ashford actually. Ashford is dropping down the order. Oh, he's almost facing the wrong way on the circuit. That would be why. What in the world happened to Richard Ashford? About to see. Oh, too much speed. The rear didn't like it, and he got punished.
I wonder if the car got unsettled with the change of direction from the chicane. Either way, Ashford down in 16th place. He's carrying on. Below tires probably struggling at this point of the race. Sean McArdle being chased down by Rhys Tarrant for the final position within the top 10. Into the hairpin. A little bit of a slide on the brakes for Rhys Tarrant, nearly into the back of Sean McArdle, who was ever so slightly deep into the corner. At least had a little bit of a later turn in than what we've seen from some drivers through that tight island bend hairpin. Into the chicane here, very early turn in for Sean McArdle here. I don't think that's quite the ideal line as Rhys Tarrant closes up, though much better run through Knickerbrook corner and opens the gap up through Clay Hill now towards Druids. Rhys Tarrant isn't going to be close enough even with the slipstream to think about any move into Druids. Philip Staples with an issue coming out of the final corner.
Yeah, he's dropped, and so Stather's gone to the pit lane. I wonder if they've both had an issue. Let's have a look. We'll see what happened to Pfeiffer's first of all. Because this is a separate incident. He just goes wide.
Maybe he's struggling with damage. I wonder if he's picked up a drive-through for incident points. He's not been in the pit lane for too long. And has gone back out on track and bump on the rear from Stather on Staples.
Yeah, we were just briefly blocked by the tree line. Let's get going again, and yeah, I think that was maybe a little bit encouraged, let's say, by the car behind.
Yeah, so Stather drops down to P12 with that suspected drive-through. Staples down to P8. That's promoted Sophie Arnwin back up to P7 after her early mistake going into Jurds, dipping a couple of wheels into the grass. So yeah, good rest follow-up from that. Just a shame about that early mistake. Where could she have been if she didn't make it? But yeah, she has recovered quite well throughout the rest of this race. As this Mason, was I saying that right?
Yeah. Your eyes don't deceive you. Tahana coming together in another car. Oh no, it was all by himself. Oh!
All by himself at T1 had a twitch. Tor has broken the front left suspension. They say iRacing is one of the most realistic racing sims ever. I'm not sure that car could turn through a right-hand hairpin as tight as Island Bend with that efficiency without a front left tire. I have my doubts.
Yeah. Oh god. Oh, he's had another spin.
I'm not surprised as we see Ashley Collins trying to fight with, I think that was Terry Williams, but they are on different laps from one another. And yeah, Mason, just bring it into pit lane, slowly, preferably. Don't speed into pits. We see the white flag flying there to indicate that everyone is coming on to the final lap of the race. And there is our race leader, Matt High, with 40 seconds left in the race. This will be the final lap, 7.8 seconds in front of Luca Munro. They should have this one wrapped up nice and easily as long as they don't make any mistakes on the final lap, though that is easier said than done. We still have a couple of battles though throughout the grid. Reese Tarn and Sean McArdle fighting over the last couple of spots within the top 10. Reese Tarn making a move for P9 there on Sean McArdle, and Sophie Arnwin, we talked about her recovery drive after that early mistake, is trying to hold on to that P7 ahead of Philip Staples. Into the left-hander here of Cascades. Sophie a lot braver towards the track limits as we see a car. Is that Ashley Collins with that red marker spinning off at the hairpin is rejoining? Is indeed, will hopefully not affect or hinder this group. Was having a couple of cars lap them as they came towards the hairpin and then just misjudged their braking and trying to avoid contact with people, locking the brakes, and did avoid everyone in fairness to them, but yeah, not an ideal way to finish this race. But out of the final corner comes Matt High, having taken I was about to say, having fallen to 11th place in the first race. They'll take the second race win here at Oulton Park and their first victory of the series. Well done, Matt High. Luca Munro will have to settle for P2, equaling their best race result of the series. And Charlie Morgan up in P3. Good result for them. And will I suspect be their best result of the series. P3 overall for the AM driver, as we see the rest of the grid coming to the line. Sophie Arnwin did hold on to P7 ahead of Philip Staples. Reese Tarn did also fend off Sean McArdle for P9. We see the final cars. Ashford seemingly in a bit of a battle, but there is a couple of lapped cars or lapping cars between them and the cars they're fighting for positions. They come towards final corner for the race in P15. But again, another manic race, very chaotic. Not really in the way we wanted to see though this race, I think it's fair to say.
No, not in the slightest. But rather entertaining evening for all, and I was trying to get the results up, but for whatever reason, it's not allowing me, which is rather annoying. So what we've had was a very interesting race, some fantastic results for some of those who do capitalise on that reverse grid. So we will just bear with iRacing for a moment. We may just need a couple more minutes before they can get the results up, and that would be ideal. I don't think it's going to let me, annoyingly. How unfortunate. I will tell you, it's Matt Hyder took the win from Luca Monroe to Charlie Morgan. Mike Pfeiffer's, Nigel Stock, Matt Cleaver, Arwen, Staples, Reese Tarrant, and Sean McCardle, your top 10. It's Berton for Terry, Peter Stather, Ben Brown, Ben Holmes, Richard Ashford, Runar Bottleson, Adrian Rich, Lewis Mason, Terry J. Williams, and Ashley Collins. That would take up the top 20. We go down to Jarrett Page, Jack Dan. What a torrid second race it's been for Jack. 23rd for Dan Tomlinson, Jerry Squirrel, 24th, Ash Hill, 25th. Actually, Jerry Squirrel and Ash Hill. Satisfying, as DNFs did not see a lap of the race, I don't believe, and not showing as starting as a drive.
Yes, Ashhill mentioned they were having some internet issues and thought that they didn't want to risk causing incidents with it, which is quite wise. Though whether it made much of a difference this race is maybe a little bit hard to say with the chaos that we had anyway. But yeah, fair and respectful decision from them. But yeah, a very chaotic race. I can barely get over everything that happened tonight, whether it was people making their own mistakes, dipping wheels into grass, entering druids, losing their rear end on pick one any corner around the track. Someone had a spin there by themselves, or some of the quite a few of the unfortunate incidents we had. Chaos, and this race, really, those that did well, it was all about staying away from and avoiding that chaos, which some did better than others.
Absolutely. Next week, for the oNiD Sim Hound British oNiD4 series, we visit the home of motorsports. Silverstone National will be around 6 next week. We then have another 2 rounds following that. Will be round 7 in 2 weeks' time at Brands Hatch, and in 3 weeks' time we will see the finale at Circuit Spa-Francorchamps. The British F4s do go to an international circuit each year, and why not go to Spa of all circuits, the full circuit with corners like El Rouge, Radion, to name a few. Scotty, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for your company this evening. It's been a rather entertaining race.
It has been indeed.
I'm sure the stewards will potentially be a little bit busy after with maybe some post-race stewarding, but the provisional results will remain provisional until those stewarding results are resolved. Until then, it's some good results for some drivers, especially in that reverse grid race.
Yep, some drivers taking advantage of it, others unfortunately missing out. But we also had some drivers in race 1 taking advantage of after that lap 1 carnage. So yeah, it was definitely a day for people we don't usually see up the front. Getting some good results, and that will hopefully go some way to helping their championship efforts if they are particularly engaged within the championships. Yeah, as you said, Silverstone National, another short track, much like Brands Indy that we're up to next. Only 4 or 5 real corners, not many. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see plenty of slipstreaming opportunities like we've seen on a couple of tracks so far this season as well. I'm sure the racing will be great. A bit more space too at Silverstone. It's a bit wider than Oulton Park here, which will hopefully allow the racing to be a bit cleaner as well. But yeah, looking forward to that next week. And of course, don't forget all the racing we have coming up over the next race. Starting again on Sunday, we have our 100 series on Le Mans Ultimate at the new Qatar circuit, just added a couple of days ago to the game. We'll be tackling it for 100 minutes in a strategy race that could go anyway. I don't know what's going to go like because I haven't even lapped the circuit yet. So if you want to know how that will go, tune in on Sunday at about 7:45 p.m. UK time. On Monday, we'll be back at 7:30 UK time for our GT3 festival. That'll be around Bahrain Outer on the new GT3 tyre model that is on the Mon Ultimate. It's quite interesting. It's changed up the pecking order amongst the cars. How much will it change the pecking order amongst our drivers? Make sure to tune in, as Bahrain Outer usually does provide a good race from my experience on the Mon Ultimate. On Tuesdays, we have the John Cooper Works Mini World Tour on the original South course. A 3 15-minute sprint races, the third of which being a full reverse grid. So it does give us some carnage, somewhat similar than to what you've seen today. We're always, of course, hoping it will be of a slightly cleaner opacity. We will be at Phillip Island next week with the minis, so make sure to join us then. And then on Wednesday, we have the Sim Hound Academy on the Mon Ultimate for newer or less experienced drivers getting to grips with the Mon Ultimate to hone their skills as they race among their peers. Next week, they will be at Coda National, not Coda affiliated, Coda National,
Yes,
as
all right.
they head around the interesting and some love, some hate. The American circuit. We'll see how our drivers fare as in the LMP2 and GT3 classes as they head into the S's, then take the shortcut, a little jump over a chicane, back onto the back straight for the national circuit. It'll be interesting to see how our drivers deal with that before we return next Thursday at Silverstone for round 6 of our British oNiD4 season. Any final words, Aidan, as we sign off?
Just good old British circuits and fantastic open wheel racing on your Thursday nights. Tune in next week, Silverstone. It will be the next challenge these drivers will take on. A bit more space, but hopefully, and I'm sure, just as much action as we've had this evening, folks. Thank you for your viewership. Do jump in to the streams later on this week as well, as we've just discussed. Be a pleasure to see, and of course, you want to come and get involved. It is discord.gg/oNiD Community Racing. Type that into any web browser you're choosing, and that will take you to our Discord server. Come and say hi, come and pester us, come and get involved. It'll be wonderful to see you. But until we are back live on Sunday, we will see you then. Take care, have a wonderful evening, and see you all very, very soon.
Good night.